wathi sodibana nge-freedom oh hinde.
Welcome to the province of Mpumalanga. Indeed, we are in conversation this afternoon with ANC Deputy President Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa following the unveiling this morning of the ANC's election manifesto for the election that is coming up in a few months' time. So we'll try and unpack in the short time we have some of the key issues that came out of that manifesto unveiled this morning by ANC President Mr. Jacob Zuma. Mr. Ramaphosa, thank you very much for joining us and welcome.
Thank you.
Let's start with whether, can you say unequivocally that the manifesto the ANC unveiled today, containing its commitment, its vision, is the best thing that the ANC could possibly come up with?
Yes, the manifesto was unveiled last night at the gala dinner. It was launched today to our members and to the people of South Africa. It is the best manifesto that we have crafted over the 20 years. It's the best because what it contains is based on a foundation, a very strong foundation, which is based on our vision of where we want South Africa to be, which is supported by millions of our people who have voted for the ANC. But it is also the best manifesto because it is underpinned by 20 years of experience and delivery in government. So most of what you see in the manifesto is not theory. It is lived experience of what we have encountered, what we have done. And some people may say this is an account of a boastful political organization. It isn't. It is a manifesto which tells the people of South Africa that we have experience, we've got the statistics, we've made mistakes, we've done some things extremely well, and we have delivered to the people of South Africa. And where we have failed, we are open enough to say we have fallen short. It also contains a very brief account of what we have done in the life of this administration, which is led by President Zuma. And beyond that, one then needs to look at the manifesto and unpack it. It has a number of components, and this is like a user's guide. The components are 20 years experience, 5 years of delivery, and after that we set out what the future should look like, what we're promising. And we're promising what we've put in the manifesto based on what we have done in the past 20 years. And we set out our overall objective, the vision, on each and every area of South African life. And we set out the strategy. And after that, we set out the mechanisms of achieving those strategies. And then we outline the interventions we are going to take. And if you look closely at it, you'll see that it also sets out the plans, the actions that will follow on what we have promised. So it's not just a dream. It's not just something that we've dreamt of. It's a lived experience type of manifesto. That is why we characterize it as the best manifesto that we've crafted thus far.
Now we'll get into some of the specific areas, but in the manner you've said it and in how you've crafted it as you have just described, did you say the things you wanted to say, especially the admissions where you have faltered? Did you say that as frankly, as openly as you possibly could? In other words, when someone sitting at home says, I've observed the ANC over the past 20 years, can they say, from where you sit, that I think the ANC has been frank in admitting the wrongs that it may have committed?
The ANC is one of the most open organizations or institutions you can find in South Africa. It's an open book type of organization. Much of what has gone wrong within our ranks, we have admitted. We have stated quite openly, deep within the ANC itself. And where we have fallen short, also in government, we have also admitted. And there's been a plethora of accounts, both in either papers that we have done for conference, resolutions that we've adopted, and reports that have been put out. So much of that has been admitted. In the manifesto, we do say much still needs to be done. There have been areas where there have been weaknesses, but much still needs to be done. And a manifesto, by definition, is a forward-looking type of document that tells the public and the would-be voters and supporters where the ANC wants to take the country. And that's precisely what we have done.
Now, to someone who says, yes, Mr. Ramaphosa, you're correct. You do make a recollection of your achievements of the past 20 years. You do make some admissions. But perhaps you are sort of not quite as forthcoming as you perhaps should, and that the thinking behind it was perhaps more motivated by your desire not to be seen to have faltered as much as people think you have. In other words, there's a sameness about it that many people may say is in fact troubling. In other words, people will say, we've heard it all before, and we do not think that you are wrong in many respects, but we just do not think you've worked hard enough to actually find out what is exactly wrong with, for example, the economy, to find out what is exactly wrong, which has led to instances or incidents of corruption or allegations of corruption that people are seeing in society. That you were helped and you were trying at all cost to say, yes, there's been wrongs, but we've also done well. And you tried everything possible to sort of maintain that kind of narrative.
Yeah, the approach that you're outlining is adopted by people who are quite negative and unconstructively critical, and who approach life from a point of view of saying the glass is half empty. We tend to say the glass is half full, and look at how do we fill the glass, and focus more attention on the measures that we need to take to fill the glass. And if you look at our record over the past 20 years, as a ruling party, you will find that we have made progress, and South Africa is a much, much better place than it was 20 years ago. And this is not a boastful statement. It is the reality. The reality when you look at on all counters. You look at the economy, you look at health, you look at even crime and corruption, you look at education, you look at nearly everything, rural infrastructure or rural development infrastructure, and we will get into all those areas. We have moved the needle quite substantially. But we are not gloating. We are not dwelling on that past. If the ANC were not to win the elections, whoever comes in will find that there is a foundation that has been built, and it is a foundation that is quite deep-rooted, that cannot be uprooted so easily. So the foundation is there. South Africa is a much different place than it was 20 years ago. We're not gloating. We're saying we have all worked together. All of us as South Africans, have worked together to create this new South Africa in all its facets. So let us use that foundation collectively to build going forward, because this is a long journey. The founding father of our nation, Nelson Mandela, says it's a long walk to freedom, and it's a long walk to transformation, to development. But you cannot say the steps that you've taken in the past are useless, are worthless, don't even look back. We say you've got to look from where you came in order to know where you are going.
Mr. Ramaphosa, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about jobs and the economy.
So what are they advertising?
People to like buy.
SABC News plays a critical role in providing unbiased and reliable news. We have a well-established reputation of uncovering, reporting and delivering news. A significant growth in popularity of our news demonstrates the demand for our news content. We continue to provide unrivaled coverage of vital events in and out of the country. Wherever the news is happening, we'll be there to bring them to you at the right time. No one has the news covered like SABC News. We lead and they follow. SABC News, Africa's news leader.
It seems McDonald's is falling out of flavor. The world's biggest restaurant chain by revenue has missed the estimates of analysts with its latest results. The Department of Health is pushing ahead with changes in regulations on how tobacco products may be displayed in stores. It says the regulations are aimed at reducing exposure to such products and should help curb smoking, but people in the industry disagree.
That's business news, weekdays at 8 p.m. on SABC News.
Good evening and welcome to Kaleidoscope, the show that brings you the very best of Africa to the world. Just a few kilometers away from the hustle and bustle of the city is an animal sanctuary known as the Lion Park. Our great team went to go check out and see if the lion is still singing tonight.
Among all of the cat's family, cheetahs are the most easiest to train or to tame.
A youth leader in South Africa said if white people don't like it, that the youth are going to lead South Africa, they can adapt or fly. And I said, thank you for the title. So again, I thank politicians for my title.
That's Kaleidoscope, Sundays, 5:30 p.m. on SABC News.
Welcome back, and if you just joined us, we're in conversation with the ANC's Deputy President, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, trying to unpack some aspects of the ANC's election manifesto that was officially launched this morning by ANC President Mr. Jacob Zuma. Now, every year, Mr. Ramaphosa, in its January 8th statement, the ANC puts jobs up there. Every year when the President of the country makes his or delivers his State of the Nation address, he puts jobs up there. It's been like that, I think, for the past 20 years. How much of what was said this morning is ritualistic, if you like, because you know that that's what people want to hear about, so you have to say it? And how much of it is a realistic offering, taking into account all the problems or the challenges that we've seen over the past year at least?
Yeah. No, this is not ritualistic. We've often talked about jobs. We were at a conference last year in Mangaung, when the conference decided that we are now in our second phase of transition, and we need to have a radical form of transformation. A radical form of transformation which will lead to the economic emancipation of our people. So that is the mandate that we have got from that conference. And we've been at work looking at precisely what this radical transformation should be that will lead to the economic emancipation of our people. And a number of initiatives that we've come up with. And if you look closely at the manifesto, you'll see that the section on the economy and jobs occupies quite a big chunk of the manifesto. We're laying emphasis on that. And we're focusing on jobs. The priority areas that we focused on in our last election, the 5 areas, we've made progress on them. But we are repeating them again and saying these still remain our priority areas. We want to focus especially on jobs and decent jobs that are sustainable.
When you say you want, even if you are repeating them, is that perhaps an acceptance of a fact that you haven't done well in them?
No, it's an acceptance of the fact that we have done well. On education, we've done well. On health, we've done well. On crime and fighting corruption, we've done very well. So we are putting in jobs again, because the problem of jobs is a global problem. There is no country today in the world that is not grappling with the problem of unemployment. The developed economies as well as the developing economies. So we are also in that mix. A number of initiatives that we have taken also helped us. In the past years since 2008, when we went through a world recession, we lost 1 million jobs, and we've been able to regain those. And if you look at where we have come from since 1994, many more people are in work today than they were, because the management of the economy by the ANC has been very, very good. We've stabilized the economy. We inherited a corrupt state. We inherited an economy that was in decline, and our economy has been growing continuously. Now, what are we going to do? What measures are we going to take? We as a government are going to invest in our own economy in a massive way. So investment is going to be one of the key features of stimulating economic growth. We are going to focus on industrialization so that our manufacturing sector begins to recover. We are going to make sure that we invest enough money, which will also in infrastructure. I mean, we've already invested a lot of money in infrastructure. We're going to be investing, and we're hoping to encourage the private sector to also invest. What will that lead to? It will lead to job creation. And what type of jobs will these be? They will be in various sectors of our economy. And we already see this beginning to happen. The expanded public works program has thus far employed 6 million people. And we see it employing more millions of people. We're going to focus on the employment of young people. Young people are even going to have set-asides. Now, that is a complete different approach from what we had in the past few years.
Allow me to take you back a little bit, because if you, for instance, public works programs have been there for quite a while, and I don't think anyone disputes the fact that they have made a difference.
Yes.
But if you look at manufacturing, for example, which you cited as an example, there are people who are projecting, who projected, in fact, only this past week, that we're probably going to see in the region of 10-11% job losses in manufacturing. So the question, I guess, is, and in fact, if you look at infrastructure, I mean, government has a massive infrastructure rollout program, which the state-owned enterprises are also playing a big part in. So that is not in dispute, and that has been happening for a good few years now. The question, I guess, people would like to know is, what are you going to do differently this time, even in the areas that have been going on for quite a while?
Well,
that which you think is going to make a difference this time around?
Yeah, there are quite a number of measures. For instance, with regard to the youth, we're going to be encouraging those who contract with government to make sure that they bring in young people as for internship, as learners in projects that they do for government. Now, that is going to sweep a number of young people into employment. Now, if you're a contractor and you'd like to do business with the government, we would like you to do that. We're going to be encouraging companies to take up the incentive measures or offerings that have been put in place to employ young people. We're going to be encouraging various other places, including the private sector generally, to invest, because the private sector has been rather slow in investing. That is why we're facing an era of deindustrialization. Now, our state-owned enterprises are going to be encouraged, in fact, are going to be mandated to align what they do with the approach of a developmental state that the government has adopted, and also to realize that we want to see a radical change. We want to see radical transformation. So there is a plethora of initiatives, and one of the key changes is going to be education. Our FET colleges have been recording increased intake of young people, and those graduates, as they leave college, we want them to be placed in learnerships and internships, and there is no shortage of opportunities. So we want the job opportunities to increase. The universities have doubled their intake, almost from 500,000 1994 to almost 1 million now, and it's increasing. The FET colleges, we're going to get them to increase their intakes. The teacher training colleges also to increase their intakes, the nursing colleges. So all these education efforts lead to one thing, that they then give people increased opportunities when it comes to jobs. And of course, we're going to be focusing on small and medium businesses. There's money that is going to be set aside just to assist them in relation to incubation, in relation to training, in relation to funding as well. And the banks, financial institutions are also going to be encouraged to fund those who are not able to access funding. The developmental funding institutions are also going to be encouraged on a mandate basis that they now need to be funding more and more of various businesses so that we can generate growth. Now, if you look at the various measures that have been put in our manifesto, and this is not like a thumbsuck. Many of those measures have been tried and tested, and we are not just smoking something. We've tested them, they work, we are certain that they can work, and so we're upscaling quite a number of them. My own view is that we should be able, as the president said this morning, to create 6 million jobs in the next few years. And I think this is possible. And if we align our thinking and what we are doing in government with the National Development Plan, we will, by 2030, have created easily 11 million jobs. Now, this is a government that is not sleeping or sitting on its laurels. It is on the move. It has tried a number of things, They have yielded good results, and now it is going to upscale. The building of 2 universities is unprecedented in the history of our country within a short space of time. And what is that going to do? It's going to create opportunities. When the president announced it today at the rally, it received rapturous applause because
but it's been there before. I mean, it's been in the pipeline.
Yeah, but it's starting. It's happening this year. I mean, those universities are being built this year. It's not a dream. This is now going to happen. But the response of the audience was quite instructive because they focus on acquisition of education as a main changer, as an opener of doors. Like what President Mandela said. He said, education can change your life.
I don't think. I mean, it's anything. It was to be expected. I mean, when you talk about education,
yes,
to South Africans, it's something they value.
For
so
sure.
Anything you do in that regard,
Thank
they will welcome with very warm hands. But I want to take you back to whether there are specific sectors of the economy or industries that you intend to do with something perhaps you haven't done before. You mentioned banks, and I don't know whether you're going to give them incentives or what you want them to do. You've mentioned manufacturing, but are there other areas that you are specifically targeting?
Well, obviously the mining industry is a key industry, and we're going to be focusing on, for instance, the northern belt, where there is platinum, palladium, in the Limpopo province and in Mpumalanga. We're going to be focusing on that to make sure that we put in the infrastructure that is required to extract those minerals. But we've gone further. We're focusing now on beneficiation. And we're saying we now must go beyond just talking about beneficiation. There are a few companies that have proven that it is possible and it is doable. So we're now going to be pushing the envelope a bit more and saying, let us look at beneficiation. The government is determined that we should go in that direction. We want the private sector to play a key role. We want the state mining company also to play a key role in all this. And the government is going to be there as a facilitator as well as an initiator. So the government is going to be playing a role as a leader, as an initiator, as a facilitator, and as a catalyst in the whole process of industrialization in the mining industry, in the construction industry.
Before we leave the mining industry, I can't resist this, because you have a situation where some of the companies, one of them a company you're associated with, are in fact involved in there's possible strikes coming up over the next few weeks and months. Platz, Lonmin, so they are facing possibilities of strike. What is going to be the ANC government's involvement in that? But not only that, the responsibility that these mining companies have towards the welfare of workers, from decent wages to housing, health matters, better industrial relations, and so on. What responsibility are you going to take in ensuring that that too is addressed?
We want companies in general, particularly mining companies, to live up to the commitments that have been set out in the mining charter. The commitments are very clear, and a number of those companies have said that they haven't lived up to those commitments. So we want them to live up to those, because if they do, that too is going to stimulate the creation of jobs. When they begin to accommodate their workers and build houses, in those areas the construction industry begins to benefit. Even some of the workers who may have lost their jobs through retrenchment, they will find a second wind in their own lives where they find other jobs and they can be retrained and do other things, and they can be fully assisted. So we want them to live up to what has been set out as a charter. And employment equity also comes to the fore, and we want the bargaining councils to work efficiently, to be able to resolve disputes, so that we don't have debilitating disputes that happen now and again on a continuous basis in the industry. So various industries therefore are going to be focused on, so that they lead to one thing. They lead to a radical transformation that is going to lead to economic emancipation. And if you focus on that, you'll find that each industry has its own role to play. And let me say, the ANC does not foresee itself, the ANC government does not foresee itself and its party doing all this alone. And we are saying everyone has a responsibility. All of us as South Africans need to work together to achieve these ideals, which are wholly supported by majority of South Africans in our country.
But I mean, part of the reason, perhaps a big one at that, that you, the ANC seems to be having challenges in trying to facilitate dialogue, but also promote a communication between the bosses and the workers, especially in the Platinum Belt. That's precisely because there's a new union, and this union happens to be, shall we say, hostile towards, or is certainly not your ally in the way the NUM is. So AMCU is determined to exert itself and to demand things that are not going to embarrass an ally. How are you going to deal with that as a government? Because the reality is that they do not look up to the ANC in the way the NUM does as a leader.
I mean, one of the things that we as South Africans are really good at is dialogue. We need to continue dialogue. Dialogue, and the way we have executed it, has brought us to where we are. Nelson Mandela, the father of our nation, is the one who has taught us a lot of lessons about dialogue. He sat in prison and initiated a dialogue with his enemies, people who wanted him to die in prison. He opened dialogue with people who did not like him at all and engaged them. And that is what has defined the many great achievements that we have in our country. And if we utilize dialogue, talking to each other, engaging, even as we come from completely opposite sides, whether we be bosses and workers, whether we be different political parties, whether we be whatever, if we remember that we are where we are because we have engaged in dialogue as a nation, and we built this democracy together based on being able to talk to one another, we will find solutions. Solutions are always there. We have to look for them. And you do not negotiate with your friends. You negotiate with people who you don't get on with. And so even in industry, even in politics and many other places, we've got to engage. And I believe that engagement, even in the mining industry, we've got to do it, even as it may seem difficult, even as it may seem worthless or useless or pointless. We've got to continue engaging, and finally we find each other and we find a consensus. Building a national consensus is what should define us as South Africans. That is what our manifesto also calls for. We've been able to come close to building a national consensus through the National Development Plan. Earlier, we had the Freedom Charter, around which South Africans, the majority of South Africans, built a national consensus. Then we had the Constitution. Now we've crafted a National Development Plan, and we now saying, let us take it forward. Let's get together, build a national consensus, and build our country into a solid, prosperous, and succeeding country.
Allow Mr. Ramaphosa to take another commercial break. We'll be back right after this.
As the biggest, the most extensive, diverse news organization and the best content provider of choice in Africa, we aim to offer the nation breaking news, continuous content updates, and current affairs programming throughout the day. We are extremely devoted to putting the news in context and providing the nation with the news they want in their own language. We reflect the world to the nation and the nation to itself. This is SABC News. All local, all global, all the time. Exclusive to DSTV.
With so many bad incidents happening around us, we continue sourcing, unpacking and televising nation-building and compassionate stories. From the nation's pride, those who go all out, top achievers, hard workers, those dedicated to making this country a better place, and unusual friendships. Catch all these and more on SABC News.
Well, good evening. Welcome to yet another bumper edition of Sports Live. Tonight we have a bit of a triple threat in the show.
That's Sports Live, daily at 8:30 p.m. on SABC News, Channel 404.
Welcome back. We're in conversation with ANC Deputy President Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa following the ANC's unveiling, formal unveiling this morning of its election manifesto. Mr. Ramaphosa, we've run out of time, so I'm going to go through a few issues with perhaps greater speed than we have done thus far. I want to talk to you or ask you about corruption. It's a concern for South African. I don't need to tell you that.
Yeah.
And they talk openly about it. And if you look at social media and others, people are actually more aggressive, and they really become quite emotive when they talk about corruption. What is the ANC's assessment of the level and state of corruption in the country?
Well, the ANC is concerned about corruption, and that is why we've taken it up in quite a big way. Even in the manifesto, we're firstly looking internally. We're saying people who are charged and found guilty of corruption must get out of those positions, the positions of leadership. And if they don't, the ANC itself will take steps against them. That's the first thing. But we also go further to look at the sources of corruption. And one of the sources of corruption is our tender system. And it's generally known that through tenders, people have been able to dish out patronage. They've been able to find ways of being very corrupt. And we are saying it's now going to be centralized. We're going to centralize the tender system, and we're going to have a central procurement officer who is going to check prices, who is going to check the costs that should be incurred in procuring a service or some goods, who's on to check whether there's transparency in tenders, and who's going to check everything. So we're going to the source of corruption.
Is this an acknowledgement that, or is there a view, or is this stance informed by perhaps a view that the tender system is probably the single biggest contributor to corruption, especially corruption that has to do with state?
Without any doubt, the tender system has been used, and in fact, in many cases, abused. Abused either to favor friends, to favor relatives, and people have done a whole number of things utilizing the tender system to enrich themselves. But we're going further to say public servants or public officials should not do business with government. And we've had incidents where public servants who are themselves either issuing tenders or adjudicating tenders or managing tenders or doing something with tenders have been doing business with the state. That has been reported over and over. So we are going to the source of the problem. And we are being candid about it. There are problems that we have experienced, and the ANC is determined to root out corruption within its own ranks and as it affects society. But we go further and to say, we all need as South Africans to root out corruption, even in the private sector, because corruption does not only reside in the public sector. Sometimes it is initiated from the private sector. It is players from the private sector who go to public representatives or public servants and entice them with all manner of offers and all that. And that too needs to be rooted out. And we've had, in various sectors of our economy, things like collusion and all that. That is corruption, and it needs to be rooted out. So we want to root out corruption from the South African moral calendar or moral psyche, if you like.
Now, I want us to talk about, this obviously is the beginning of your electioneering and your election campaign going forward. Where do you think the ANC is vulnerable or most vulnerable?
Well, the ANC has taken stock of where it is. And we believe that based on what we want to do, the commitments that we are making, if you look at our manifesto, we're making a number of commitments, almost 22 in various areas. We believe that we are in a strong position. We're in a strong position, and we have to work hard to win the support of our people. We have support. That we do not doubt, but we want to win more support.
Do you think that what would happen if the ANC, because to many people, if the ANC was to even go down, that would, in many respects, be a loss? Do you share that view?
No, we are not going to.
Are you worried about dropping support at all?
No, I'm not worried about dropping support.
You don't think it's going to happen?
I don't believe it's going to happen. So I am very confident that the ANC is going to increase its support, because what it has done has been clearly well inscribed in the hearts and the minds of our people. They know what the ANC is capable of doing.
And you don't think any of the parties, old and new, are any threat whatsoever in any way to the ANC?
Looking around, I don't see any threat, quite honestly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Well, that's where we're going to end. It's that conversation with ANC Deputy President Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa. It's back to the studio.
What so